You might have heard people talk about how Dvalin and Azhdaha are two of the seven original dragon servants. If you think about it, it also makes a lot of sense. If Venti and Zhongli are the only two original Archons alive, why would the dragons be the same and have only Animo and Geo originals alive? But there is a huge issue you might have not noticed with this entire theory. So in this video, I will explain my 2 cents about the dragons and why they might not be the same as the community's initial judgment. Before 3.6 comes out and Nahida's story proves me entirely wrong. Or maybe not. So what actually is a dragon in Genshin? According to the book Before Sun and Moon, when Primordial One descended to the old world, there were 7 dragon sovereigns. They ruled over the 7 elements and the land itself. Today we see the descendants of these dragons as bishops. So with that line of thought, the Lord of Geo Bishops is Azhdaha, followed by Primo Geo Bishop, Geo Bishops, and the Geo Bishop hatchlings. Similarly, Dvalin can also be considered a dragon for now, although there are no Animo Bishops. Baptismal Bishops also fall into these same principles. But let me touch upon them later because they play a major role in this whole theory. And most recently, we got the dragon of Verger, Apep, who implies that it has lived for longer than even Zhongli, who is supposed to be the oldest Archon alive. And Nahida says that history of dragons started from only the beginning of Teyvat. If you are perceptive, you might have caught on to where the problem lies. According to Before Sun and Moon, Primordial One was the creator of Teyvat. They were responsible for splitting the old world into separate pieces and isolating the continent we now known as Teyvat. But as Nahida says, dragons' history only goes so far as the beginning of Teyvat. So, what did the Primordial One vanquish when it first descended? Well, to put it simply, those are also dragon lords. Let's go back and look at the origin of the already well-known dragons with this new knowledge in mind. As said in Breeze Amidst the Forest, Dvalin was born when the gods still walked on mortal land, so about 2000 to 3000 years ago, by the convergence of Animo energy in a place called High Heavens. Don't ask me if this is Celestia or not, because I have no idea, and it wouldn't be much of a surprise either if it did come from Celestia. If you look at this panel from the manga, there seems to be a couple of dragons flying around Celestia, which means Dvalin is not the only sky dragon that lives around Celestia. While these dragons could be Animo Bishops, Dvalin could be the Dragon King of Animo. There is a possibility that Dvalin has nothing to do with the Dragon Lords, but let's assume he is one of them for now. Moving on to Liyue, we have Azhdaha. According to Zhongli's statements, most ancient geo-life forms lived underground and are blind. Because let's be real, if you live underground in the dark, why do you need eyes? But from time to time, Azhdaha would move around. This would shake the earth and cause earthquakes. As far as I know, earthquakes are bad for humans, so Zhongli unearthed Azhdaha and sculpted him into a shape of a dragon, and then recruited him to fight in the Archon War. So technically he is not even a dragon, just an ancient geo-elemental being made to look like a dragon. But as I said before, let's assume he is also a Dragon King. While I was explaining these origins, did you notice something strange? Something that would rule them out of being the original 7 Dragon Lords. Both of them were born after Teyvat was created. But the original 7 Dragon Sovereigns were alive before Teyvat was made. Heck, they were presumed to be dead after Primordial One fought with them for 40 years. Word to word, the book states 40 winters entombed the flames, and 40 summers churned the seas. The 7 sovereigns were vanquished, and the 7 nations submit to the heavens. The Primordial One, the great sovereign, began the creation of heaven and earth for our sake. Only after Thanos put down the Dragon Lords and chased away anyone who didn't want to obey them, did they create Celestia and Teyvat. There is one keyword I didn't preface enough until now. Dragon Lords of the Old World. See where this is going? After Primordial One changed the world, it is now the new world. Even though Thanos changed the landscape and put down the heavenly principles, the world's principles would continue to exist. Everything that has to happen on Earth will happen either way. I think the dragons also fall into this principle. Every time a dragon king dies, the world will choose another dragon to replace that crown. That dragon will then fill the power vacuum. So when Primordial One went on its genocide against the dragons, they might have killed all the dragon lords of the old world. But as time passed, new dragons were born like Azhdaha and Dvalin, the new generation of dragons. Let's talk about Inazuma's dragon. Most people assume this dragon lord doesn't exist. But oh no, it does exist. Even now, it could be living and breathing normally. It could also be in your teapot or the character list right now. Yes, I'm talking about Kokomi. But before that, let's visit Enconomia. In Enconomia, there are some special bishops known as Primordial Baptismal Bishops. According to the in-game archives, they were the dominant race on this planet, but the former 7 sovereigns were killed by a power from the heavens, causing the dragons to wither away. Using different sources, we can figure out there were 2 serpents in ancient Enconomia. One is Orobashi, and the other is the serpent skeleton that is the base of Enconomia. Just look at the Enconomia map. It literally has places that says Serpent's Heart, Serpent's Bowels. Different records say that one of these serpent dragons had corals and the other had horns. If you read anything about Orobashi, it has corals slapped on it everywhere. This one, and this one too. All of them talk about how he had corals. We have factual information that say that the skeleton on Yashiori Island is Orobashi, so the other had to be the serpent with the horns. In Genshin, serpents and dragons are more or less the same thing. Therefore, we can say that this dragon, who was dead in Enconomia long before it even fell into the Dark Sea, is one of the original dragon lords killed by the Primordial One in the old world. Its descendants are the Primordial Baptismal Bishops, on the brink of extinction now. But the problem is, when Orobashi was in control of Enconomia, he instructed researchers to do experiments on the bishops. As recorded in Baptismal Bishop experimental records, Enconomia researchers tested on bishops using different elemental conditions. As a result, much stronger bishops who could use electro and cryo were forcefully evolved. So in the game archive of Ball Theater Baptismal Bishop Hatchling, it talks about how a whole new bunch of dragon lords are coming into existence now that the original 7 sovereigns got taken out by the Primordial One. However, these bishops that use the primordial hydro element have been experimented with and mutated so much a new dragon lord cannot be born from within them. But the saving grace for them is that a prophecy says that a new dragon lord will be born as a human. And as the current theory goes, Kokomi is that dragon. As intended, she uses the hydro element the original dragon did, and her constellation more or less looks like a dragon too. So for the people who think Inazuma didn't have a dragon, here you go. From an evolutionary standpoint, that makes sense for the dragon to reincarnate as a human. Humans were the ones who essentially destroyed them. So in a way, taking the form of the being they are afraid of gives them survivability. But talking about Kokomi turning against us and going against Celestia due to hatred passed down from the dragons is a stretch. Even though their ancestors had beef with Celestia back in the day, both Azhdaha and Dvalin seems to have forgotten about it or outright didn't have that information in their brains. They were more than okay to work for an Archon working under Celestia, so I wouldn't make Kokomi the exception. There is also a theory that says Sumi is the Dragon Lord, but that is inherently incorrect because she is what you call a vassal of Watatsumi, a title given to a bunch of half snake, half human Orobashi's familiars. Sumi was only raised by bishops, but doesn't possess bishop blood as far as we know. So while I was digging around this topic, I had this idea. Was Orobashi also a Dragon Lord reincarnated? But the more I looked into it, the less likely it seemed. As it turns out, he was a regular god who escaped into the Dark Sea during the Archon War. That's when he stumbled upon these Enconomia people who were suffering, so he decided to help them by driving away the bishops and giving them hope. And just like that, he became their god. It's pretty crazy to think about how a god with no followers suddenly got a bunch of worshippers like that. But, I couldn't get this gut feeling that Orobashi was not the most virtuous god either. He personally supervised the experiment done on the bishops to stop the Water Dragon Lord from re-merging. And in the end, we found the blood branch coral that contains Orobashi's vitality inside one of these baptismal bishops locked underground who were made specifically to be the strongest. Sure, it might look like he did this to preserve a bit of his power to do the Watatsumi Goryo Matsuri to prevent soil erosion. But I couldn't brush off this voice in my head saying it's like keeping a bunch of people hostage by poisoning and giving the antidote periodically. So when his body dies because of Celestia's curse he got by reading before sun and moon, he could eventually be resurrected because people still worship him. People worship the god basically equals to their soul not dying and keep powering them. This was what Rukadevata did when she disappeared from Irmansul. Then again, why did he go and curse Yashiori Island when he died with the Tadaragami? It seems kind of fishy that all we know about this guy comes straight from him or his loyal followers. Shouldn't there be a third-party perspective? I'm not saying I don't trust him or his sources, but it would definitely make things a lot more accurate and unbiased. This makes me think that he was trying to experiment himself and forcefully become the successor to the dead dragon in Enconomia in secret. Just forget about it, maybe use it as food for thought, but nothing much. So as we see from Kokomi's example, whenever Dragon King dies, there will always be a new one to replace that throne. The only person who seems to remember this beef with Primordial One is Apep. But then again, she is also a special case when talking about memories and stuff. Dendro is the element of life and wisdom and is connected someone to the Irmansul tree. So we can't rule out the possibility of them doing an Eranjega and passing down memories. Maybe as always, the trailer was a huge scam and sent us on a wild goose chase for nothing. Well, if you are watching this from the future, tell me, was I wrong? But be mindful and don't spoil it for the rest of the good folk in the comments. And that was a piece of my madness. Hey everyone! Hope you are excited for 3.6 or already enjoying 3.6. Well, I'll be on my way to sleep now cause this week is the only holiday I get before my college decides to kill us alive with exams and final reports. Anyway, smash that like button. Hitting that subscribe button is always appreciated. Let's get that small number to a big number. In the meantime, watch these videos. As always, this was Ekamin. Thanks for watching and until next time, let your imaginations run wild.